Good morning, Intro to 2D. Happy Fog Day. Apparently we're going to be having actually 2 days off this week, both today unexpectedly with the fog and tomorrow's originally planned flex day. So today I want to just take some time out to cover what we were supposed to cover today in class, which is to go over the Surreal Devices. So you can see I have a list of them right here. This is going to be important to us for this project because you will need to end up selecting 3 of these devices to implement into your project. So let's dive in. This is an example of using scale. So changing the object's size in relation to around it. So either this is like a James and the Giant Peach kind of scenario, or it's a life-size apple in a dollhouse. Doesn't really make sense, right? So think about really exaggerating scale. Levitation is a really easy one to implement into your collage. Just basically making it appear like something is floating. So again, that's going to be determined by your background. And making sure that something feels like it is off kilter or lifted up out of space, and typically something that we would not see floating, like you can see the example here with the rock or the flower. Juxtaposing. Now this is one that we saw quite a lot of yesterday in the Disney video, and juxtaposing simply means that you are joining images in an impossible combination, in an impossible situation. This one is definitely more of an illusion. If you can see, the horse's leg is going from behind a tree and in front of a tree at the same time, or the fact that we have these repeated negative spaces that seem like they're okay, but then we realize, hey, part of the horse is missing. That one is, I would say, a little bit more complex of an idea. But again, juxtaposing 2 images that normally wouldn't go together. Dislocation. We saw this again in the video yesterday where you're seeing something in an unfamiliar place. Okay, you're taking something from its usual environment. So here we have in the middle of a desert some crazy looking statue and an alleyway. And a woman just randomly holding something that appears to be dead. Maybe it's a dead mouse. I'm not actually sure on that one. But taking something out of its familiar environment, something that does not belong. One of these things is not like the other. Transparency is also one that is actually pretty easy to implement, where you are simply using the silhouette of the object and seeing through to something. So with our collage, you may be using one entire image like this, that would be almost like a background image, but actually layering it on top of another image so that we can see through. Now, if you were using silhouette, you need to be very cautious and careful to cut out a very detailed and refined shape. Transformation. We see a lot of this in Dali's work, where yesterday we were discussing the persistence of memory. This is actually another version of the persistence of memory. It's a little more of like a cubist style, but we were discussing the melting clocks, and essentially objects are just starting to strangely morph. Maybe they're oozing or dripping or melting, or one thing is turning into another. Symbolism is a little bit more challenging to think about. Really just thinking about allegories and metaphors. So you can see some of the examples I have here, like a sea of grief or a broken heart, apple of my eye. So maybe they're, I went forward, sorry about that. Those are some ideas of metaphor, and allegory was really just thinking about how you can use symbols to express big ideas or concepts, like a dove equaling peace, an eagle equaling freedom, mother equaling nature. Everyone will be required to come up with a title, because oftentimes when we look at the title of a work, it suggests a deeper meaning. Maybe we weren't seeing something, and because of the title, we are able to look a little bit deeper and find more meaning. So, for instance, De Chirico is a surrealist artist. I'm not particularly a fan of him because, well, it's just not my sense of aesthetic, but this particular image is very intriguing to me. And when I look at the title, The Enigma of the Hour, it makes me pay more attention to the clock. And I think, okay, it's, 2:55. What is so enigmatic about this hour? Did something just happen, or something about to happen? And then I notice this person in the shadow over here, and this person out in the light. I wonder about this little figure up here in the window. So honestly, the title of this work makes me think a little bit more. Reality Reinvented, really dealing with illusion and creating just unusual relationships between things. So if you see this one, swans reflecting elephants, that tells us to look maybe for swans and elephants. We see here that there is a pond, and normally with water we see reflections. So we see the 3 swans sitting on the pond, and then the neck of the swan actually then turns into the trunk of the elephant. Do you see that? Same for here, and then the body of the swan ends up being the elephant's ears. Normalcy, essentially something odd is going on, but there's little to no emotion. You start to question what is reality. This one by, I think this is Magritte. This one always reminds me of the network commercials that Verizon used to have, where this big group of people followed everyone around. Space, you can play around with depth. This particular one by Magritte, again, you can kind of see the illusion created between the blank canvas and the scene. It seems that they are one and the same. The only thing that tells us different is this little vertical line right here that suggests the edge of the canvas. Or Dali here, where you're seeing a skull within a skull within a skull. Now, in terms of other project requirements, in addition to using 3 surreal devices, I am also asking you to create the illusion of depth. Now, we did cover this in our last project and talked about ways to show depth. So this should be review, but one of those ways is overlapping. Another is size change. Now, when these two go together, overlapping and size change, if you have something very large overlapping something really small, it definitely starts to give more of the illusion of deep space versus this one that are very similar in size, so it suggests shallow space. Texture and detail simply means that things that are in the foreground are probably going to be more detailed, more texture is evident, versus as they recede in the distance, they might be more foggy, more hazy. Placement on the page can also work along with size change. As you can see down here, something that is lower in the foreground tends to be larger. The higher up you go in the background, it tends to be smaller. And then linear perspective. This might come into play with some sort of background that you decide to do, or the objects that you select. In the last project, you could actually draw your objects in perspective with a vanishing point to make them look like they're going back in space, but this might actually be looking for an object that is at an alternate, viewpoint, more of a foreshortened viewpoint. Another thing that I want you to consider is, again, foreground, middle ground, background. We talked about that just below here again. Things that are closer to us in the foreground are going to be typically larger, middle ground a little bit smaller, and then background smaller yet, and then the detail will fade out as it goes. Okay, Now, we did talk about the Surreal-Scape requirements a bit yesterday, but I just want to go over that a little bit again because today, instead of doing this in class, we're obviously at home and working on it in our own time. So I'm going to ask that you review the PowerPoint. I'll include that in the Canvas assignment. But we're really going to spend some time researching artists. I don't want you to just be grabbing randomness, random assortments of images. We are really going to be intentional about looking at these artists and really diving in to think about what we like and why. What kinds of images are they using? How are they creating a composition? In addition to that, you are going to be finding, I switched again. You are going to be finding 5 reference pictures, okay? And I will write this out a little bit more detailed in the explanation in your Canvas assignment, but 5 reference images. Again, you're creating depth and visual perspective. We're still thinking about the rule of thirds, which means you're dividing your composition in 3, both vertically and horizontally, and the intersection of those points is where a strong focal point would be. Rule of odds, again, tells us that odd numbers are more visually pleasing. And then thinking back to what we just started with today with those surreal devices, you need to pick 3. And then down here, just to have a little more variety, you need to pick a person or an animal, a man-made object, and a natural element to include some way, somehow. Okay? When we look here, again, not just a hodgepodge of images, design and craftsmanship will really be important. We really still want to consider eye movement and exaggerated size. Really try to avoid strong horizontals and verticals. We want to have strong visual movement. And just because it's surreal and kind of crazy, that doesn't mean that we're ignoring everything that we've learned so far with the elements and principles. Now, I want to encourage you to flip through some of these other artists. Now, when you do a Google search on them, type in their name plus art, because guess what? Other people in the world have these names too, and I want to make sure you're looking at the right people. But I want you to kind of flip through these different images and think about what artists are really standing out to you. What about them? What type of images are they using? What surreal devices do you think they're using? Are they using a specific color scheme that you really like? How are they creating depth? You know, what things are they doing that are attractive to you? Okay. And pardon me, I'm going to flip back really quick. Go back. All right, so I'm going to wrap this video up. Make sure to read the directions on your Canvas assignment. You'll be not only looking through these artists and picking some artists to research, but you will be responding to several questions, as well as beginning to find some images that will inspire your design. Notice I say inspire. I didn't say copy. I said inspire. You, again, want to borrow ideas, but still make it your own, okay? If you have questions, please pardon me, I'm getting tongue-tied. Feel free to email me at sjones1@sacs.k12.in.us. Have a great day, guys.